I was recently asked why I put so much time and effort into writing and speaking about New Zealand's national security. The same reason you should, I replied. We owe it to our children, nieces, nephews and grandchildren to leave a better, safer country. That starts with a conversation about national security strategy. Because to not do that is indefensible, New Zealand.
Hi, and welcome to this final episode of Season 1 of Indefensible New Zealand. This is the third part of our discussion about defending New Zealand against an invading force that is intent on occupying our land. In Episode 8, I took a red team view of how New Zealand might be attacked. That was followed in the next two episodes with a long-range defence without the involvement of our allies, and a discussion about how New Zealand could be made not worth the cost of coming too close. Now it's time to consider the worst case, that our arch-enemy, Buranda, has landed forces on our shores. The reasons why New Zealand might be directly and conventionally attacked are many, including resources, access to Antarctica, and regime change to undermine Western alliances. Traditionally, the writers of defence assessments include something in their analysis stating that New Zealand is unlikely to face direct attack. Now, this is a very convenient and quite frankly lazy way of putting tough decisions in the nothing-to-see basket. There are a range of possible scenarios, but I've selected one for the purpose of this podcast. Buranda has established a forward operating base on the Chatham Islands. This began with a commercial joint fishing venture with the locals. The development of wharves and the airfield was welcomed by Chatham Islanders, who had seen little infrastructure investment from New Zealand. The Burandan Investment and Development Bank also built a new school, hotel, fire and police station. It also took a majority shareholding in Air Chathams, the local airline, which saw a fleet of modern, mid-sized aircraft and several medium utility helicopters enter service. While there were critics, Buranda had done nothing illegal. They claimed that they were just there to trade. The Burandan Blue Pacific Fishing Company openly supported a range of candidates in the 2025 local body elections. They were all successful. To celebrate the victory, the Republic of Buranda Navy proposed to send a warship to the Chathams to host a party for the new mayor and councillors. The New Zealand government, not surprisingly, declined, but the guided missile destroyer RBS Ewing-Jarvie sailed there anyway, together with the replenishment ship RBS Sikuzafuraha. There was little that New Zealand could do, as the country lacked the capability to even approach the Chathams. Allies encouraged a diplomatic solution. Meanwhile, the Chatham Islands seceded to become an independent administration zone under the Republic of Buranda. A rapid build-up of Burandan military assets quickly followed. When conflict flared soon after in the South China Sea, Buranda made its move. Fifth columnists, most of whom had been in New Zealand for decades, blew up fuel dumps across the country. A maritime and air exclusion zone was established and carriers warned to stay away or be intercepted. The undersea power cable in the Cook Strait and all but one internet cable was severed. Cyber attacks crippled government communications. Special forces landed in Ross Dependency and hoisted the Burandan flag without a fight. Anti-shipping mines were laid in the approaches to all the North Island ports except Whangarei, where the first Burandan troops landed and quickly established a beachhead. A second landing occurred in southern Marlborough, which quickly moved to secure the ports of Picton, Havelock and Nelson. The two available New Zealand P-8 Poseidon aircraft were shot down by missiles on their first sortie. One frigate was on anti-piracy patrols in the Gulf, and the other in dry dock in Singapore. Burandan precision-guided cluster munitions decimated the country's army and helicopter fleet. There was insufficient fuel for the C-130 Hercules fleet to be redeployed. Burandan naval assets, supported by marine expeditionary units, flooded into the Bay of Islands, Marlborough Sounds and Fiordland. The New Zealand government realised that further bloodshed was pointless and ordered remaining forces to cease fighting. As Burandan administrators familiarised themselves with the internal workings of the government, a familiar pattern began to emerge within society. New Zealand was now the 164th country to be subject to foreign occupation since 1900. The degree to which a population resists an occupying force is a function of several factors. The first is the degree of collective shock. The average easygoing Kiwi never dreamed that this could happen to them, and so a period of being gobsmacked occurred. This is when the Burandans set about implementing tight control measures, from taking charge of the courts, police, media and prisons to night curfews and controls on movement. Identity documents changed as internal strife increased. Another factor affecting the nation's response is the number of dead, wounded and prisoners taken. Buranda is setting out to gain popular support by being understanding. They point out corruption and other problems they have discovered in New Zealand's government and promise to sort this out for everyone's benefit, to put better people in leadership of the country. And so new elections are held. However, few Kiwis really believe that these are legitimate, so the new government, after several mass demonstrations, declares martial law. This is where there is a split between responses. Some elements of the New Zealand Defence Force are conducting an insurgency campaign. Armed groups are attacking Burandan outposts, ambushing convoys and patrols, blowing up government officials' cars and homes and carrying out targeted assassinations. The civilian population, meanwhile, has got over its initial shock and has begun a resistance movement. Information is being passed to insurgents on Burandan activity. There are frequent instances of food and water being poisoned, petrol contaminated, vehicles interfered with, and honey traps, where locals lure Burandans into an isolated place to kill them. The Burandan occupation force is becoming stretched by the growing level of insurgency and resistance. New Zealand sympathisers willing to take positions in the new government are decreasing in number as the threat to them grows. On the west coast of the South Island, insurgents and locals completely retake control of several small towns and fortify them for defence. Buildings are reinforced or cleared to provide protection, dispersion, concealment and interlocking fields of fire. Observation and sniper positions cover a range of makeshift field defences, and all routes are filled with obstacles to shape and channel any Burandan attack into killing areas. Fire hazards in buildings are dealt with. Covered routes in and out of buildings as well as mouse holes to enable movement between rooms are created. Defensive stores are stockpiled, and a pull string and flag signalling system created to defeat Burandan electronic warfare systems. The first attempt by the occupiers to counterattack ends in disaster. A company group of Burandan Marines attempting to take the town of Ross were forced to dismount from their vehicles and advance directly into the defenders' killing areas. A second group pounced on the lightly crewed armoured vehicles and captured them. Similar scenes played out in other small nearby towns. At the same time, Burandan air assets were attacked in their South Island bases. A group of power divers who disagreed with the islands being annexed fashioned explosives to the shafts of the 3 Burandan warships anchored near the islands, resulting in catastrophic damage. Faced with a rapidly deteriorating security situation and pressure on their rear area and supply routes, the Burandans withdrew from New Zealand. A coup in their country shortly after removed the militant heads of state, replacing them with an alpaca. Okay, well, it was fiction, but it was fiction with a purpose. Would New Zealanders really put up a fight, or would they allow themselves to be occupied? Hopefully, we will never know, but it is useful to consider in advance what sort of resistance could realistically be offered, but better yet, to have a national security system which ensured that this would not be a likely scenario. One additional point that I'd like to make in this recording is the fact that today is the 28th of October, and that in New Zealand is the National Day of Commemoration for the New Zealand Wars, which took place after the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi and ran through from the early 1840s through to about 1872. And a significant number of casualties, a lot of learning on both sides, and I think this is an important day in New Zealand history, and it's an opportunity to learn more about these wars. I think we have a situation where most New Zealanders know more about wars fought overseas than those that took place in their actual country. But when you think about the principles that I've been talking about in terms of defending against an occupation, you can find direct parallels in the way that Maori went about fighting against the British troops. There was entrenchments with returns, the zigzagging, there was overhead protection from mortars and shells, defence in depth perimeters, bunkers, escape routes, communications channels, all those sorts of things we've talked about in relation to that mythical occupation really actually took place in New Zealand, and Maori adapted very well and were very skillful at protecting and then moving out from the pa, the fortified village where they had chosen to fight. So take a look, there's plenty of resource online if you look up New Zealand Wars, a wealth of learning to be done there. Now that completes season 1 of Indefensible New Zealand, and in the second season we're going to be interviewing a whole range of people about national security in and around New Zealand. If you've got questions or you can think of someone you'd really like to see interviewed, please send it in to me via the unclas.com contacts page.